Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition, the final edition of 2020 of Gaarawarr's Guide, our deep dive show on Saturday mornings. Don't believe the tweets you see. We start at 9 a.m. Pacific. Hey, everybody, I'm Gaarawarr. Today we are going to be doing Gaarawarr's Guide to the core champions, including Delena. I know a lot of people are like, who's Delena? And by a lot of people, I mean me. Well, we're going to talk about Delena today. We're going to talk about all the champions today. That means we're going to go over 12 champions in one show. We've done like Gaarawarr's Guide to Alcoria, Gaarawarr's Guide to Dragonbait, Gaarawarr's Guide to Zaka. We did a whole show around one champion. We're going to do 12 in one today. So we're probably going to move right into that. We have Jay today in chat on the Senior Games account. They will be pulling questions if people have questions to ask. Remember, the first half of the show I'll be going over all of this stuff. Second half we'll do a Q&A. That's when I'll get to the questions. And I'll do the more topic appropriate questions first, and then I'll go from there. I started off, we're kind of in the Sword Coast here, because that's where everybody starts off, and this guide feels more like something for brand new players. So we're gonna tackle it from that perspective, because when you come in, these are the champions that you have available. All of these that you see glowing down here, ready to level up. These are the starting core, I think, aren't they? It's been a while. Yeah, I got them all right. Yay. So we're only going to look at these, and we're going to look at how they fit into formations, how they get used primarily. Let's pull them out, because we're going to do this one by one to make it easier. And we'll talk about their specializations and how those things might change. And I'm going to click on some distractions because why not? Hey, there we go. Now I don't have to. All right, so away we go. All right, so starting right off, we have Tutorial Dwarf. That tends to be what people refer to him. I should probably put him in his original skin. He's got a couple different skins here. And the Icewind Dale one I don't have. So this is the no skin Bruenor. This is the original Bruenor that you'll always see. Yeah, he's pretty straightforward. You get him right away. He likes to. He is not, despite them giving to us right away, he is not a tank. He is a support champion. He's not a tank or a DPS. He has some functionality of both, but primarily he is a support. He wants to inspire others to do to greatness. That is Bruenor's thing. So in that vein, we have Inspired, which increases damage of Bruenor by 100% for each adjacent champion. Again, he has some things that give him self-damage. He has some things that make him think like he's a DPS or a tank, but he's really a support. This exists, I think, primarily because he's the tutorial dwarf. They're like, we got to do something to get people through the early levels. But this doesn't matter. When you first start the game, you may need him to do some damage early on, but by early on, I mean in the tutorial. After that, this is an utterly and completely pointless ability, so you can disregard it. For all further conversations, Rally is the one we want to talk about. Increases damage of champions in the same column as Bruenor. That's his big deal. You'll notice there's some major numbers here. Ignore these numbers. Ignore some of these gigantic numbers. This account is 3 years old. It has all of the gear and all of the guilds and tons of item levels. So just keep in mind what we're talking about here are the general functionality. So this, you want to put him in the same column as your DPS, as your damage character. That is Bruenor's goal. Right after this, his next major thing is his specialization. He has Shield Master and Battle Master. Early on, when you're not to the point where you're building up huge amounts of enemies, because your tank just can't live through huge amounts of enemies, you want to go Battle Master. It's basically just, it doubles his rally effect. And it's just going to give you that extra bonus damage all the time. Whereas Shield Master is more about slowly buffing up rally to a larger amount, but it requires stacking a lot of champions. So it's 10% for each tank that's being attacked within 2 slots of him. You would have to have 10 enemies, a minimum of 10 enemies sitting on tanks constantly to get the same damage as Battlemaster. And yes, it can go up higher, but early on your tanks are gonna fall over. So we're just gonna go Battlemaster here. And then I'm gonna hold this button down for a real long time. If you didn't know, you can just click on that and hold the button down when it's on upgrade. It'll go all the way to the end. You have to click repeatedly. If we see here, for a long time after Battlemaster, that's just it. Doesn't get anything. He gets Dwarven Glory up in the 400s. Increases the effective rally for each dwarf in the formation. This is a nice bonus if you run into it. If you happen to be building a formation that has multiple dwarfs eventually, that's not really going to happen for a brand new player. But, you know, one day, I will have my full dwarf formation. But today is not that day. So this is a nice bonus if you get it, but again, don't necessarily build around this. Rally is really kind of the centerpiece of Bruenor and what you need to focus on. We can go up even further when we get to 1,000. This is what is called his Companions of the Hall buff by most people, so it's Long Lost Companions. It increases his Bounty of the Hall pool, which is the gold find, by 100%. It increases effective rally by 100% for every other Companion of the Hall in the formation. Again, these are nice bonuses to have. You don't necessarily need to build a formation around this. They're just, if it works, that's how your formation works, you're going to get a nice bonus, just like with the Dwarven Glory, but it's not anything that you need to focus everything on. Recently, we are doing this tutorial just right past the most recent soft cap upgrade here at the end of 2020. So Bruenor did get some stuff at the end of his upgrades. For what you want to know, soft cap for a brand new player, it's where there aren't any more upgrades down here. As you'll note, there's a little circle with a line through it. That means you can't buy anything else. So he now caps out at 2740, which is way up there. And he ends off his run with some rally and some all champs damage. That's really the big stuff. The self-damage stuff for a support character isn't really something we have to focus on. That's kind of filler. What you're looking for are these nice all champs damage and rally bonuses. So he got more supporty in the most recent upgrade, which is what you want from Bruenor, right? So that's our start. Up next, we have Celeste. Let me throw her in her normal guise so everybody recognizes her. We'll hide Bruenor up here. So Celeste is your slot 2 champion. She's our healer for the early game. She's basically going to be here to do some supporting again, healing and support. With her, we're looking at level 20 Crusader's Mantle. What Celeste wants, while Bruenor wants to be in the same column as the DPS, what Celeste wants is to be adjacent to them. So increase the damage of champions next to Celeste. So that can be where she is here. It can be any of these slots that I'm hovering Bruenor over. She would increase the damage of all of those people. And, oh, yes, I was moving in a circle and I can't do that. Thank you for reminding me, game. So as long as we're putting adjacent, we're gonna get that damage bonus from Celeste. If you'll notice, he's at E50, 725 E59 damage. If we move him up here, his damage goes down by quite a bit. So yeah, buff is in effect. And then her healing comes in at 40. That's her mass cure wounds, which is something you always love to see on a healer in D&D. Heals champions in the column in front of Celeste. So this is a little different, right? You may think mass cure wounds, it's everyone in the party. No. Column in front. So she's going to heal just this group. You'll see it ticking off here on Bruenor, right? If I move Bruenor down, no heals. If I move him up too, no heals. But column right in front, heals. Right? So keep that in mind. If you're going to be using Celeste as a healer, her default healing ability is just the column right in front. Which brings us to her specialization. You can either make her more damagey, right? Or buffy, right? No, not the Vampire Slayer. Just she can be more supportish. You'll buff her Crusader's Mantle, or you can make it so that she heals not one, but 2 columns in front of her. Early on, this is the one I like. We'll get into this in a bit. So we're front loading a bit of this information. It'll make a bit more sense here in a moment when we get to our next champion. But in general, when you're picking specializations, you want to pick the specialization for your champion for the way you want your formation to be when you're done building it. Not necessarily in the moment. That can require a little bit of thinking multiple moves ahead in chess style, contemplation, but it's worth it. So I'm going to go life domain here. That means not only is she healing Bruenor, but now she's healing Bruenor here too. So she'll heal all the way up to what we refer to as our tank column. Whatever the frontline column is the tanking column, which is what we want, right? Because if you're going to have a healer, they should kind of heal everywhere. I should talk about the ultimates. Let's go back. I kind of skipped over that. I was going to do them all at the end, but let's do this one by one. Bruenor's basic attack, again, he's support, so doesn't matter a whole lot. He slashes the closest enemy with his axe. But his ultimate, basically a devastating blow to the closest enemy. It's a big chunk. It's a real quick cooldown. It's not 15 seconds. It's 60 seconds base. I have his cooldown reduction maximized, so it's 75% reduction when you maximize that. So I can fire his ultimate off every 15 seconds. It's a nice little single target chunk of damage. Celeste, however, Celeste just does a magical attack. So you'll note right here, see there's this little bolt of magic. If we look at Bruenor, his is a sword. That means he's a melee attacker. She's a magical attacker. Her ultimate is Flame Strike. She calls for the pillar of flame centered on a random enemy. The secondary effect of that, as you find down here, is that, there's a couple different effects. One, yes, it calls down a pillar of flame on a random enemy, but it also burns all nearby enemies as well. And then it also heals every living member of the party to full health. We don't get a lot of full health heals in this game. That's pretty much it. So this is kind of a big deal. So keep that in mind for her. And let's see. So we picked her spec at 100. She gets that pretty early. But as you'll note, nothing else. She's real straightforward. She's like, hi, I'm gonna buff your damages, and then I'm gonna heal you. That's it. Simple living. With her upgrades, you'll see we got some Crusader's Mantle, we got some Damage All Champions, and we got some a little bit of a buff to her healing. Again, kind of straightforward. That's what you want out of your support characters when they get more upgrades. Now we're going to move to Nayeli. Watch me Nene right here. All right, original skin. Boom. This is how you will see her when you first unlock her in the game. She is a tanking character, so tanking and support. So far there aren't any pure tanks. There are pure support, there are pure DPS. There are no pure healers, there are no pure gold, there are no pure tanks. So tanking and support. She's going to come in, she has a cleave as her basic attack. And her ultimate, I guess we can talk about her ultimate real quick. It attacks a random enemy, does a lot of damage, but the big effect is that it stuns all enemies on the screen. That's a big deal. That's enjoyable. All right, so right off the bat, she gets her Aura of Courage, increases the damage of champions in the column behind her. So once again, we're talking about column stuff. So that means this is why we kind of set this up the way we did. Because in this second column here, there's only 2 spots, and Bruenor wants to buff someone that's in his column. That means we want to place a DPS in the column with him. But Nayeli only buffs in the column behind. So that means we need Bruenor in the second column, and we need this space open for our future DPS, which means Celeste needs to be back here just in this formation with the way I've set this up with this combination of champions, which is why we then put her healing to go all the way to the front. Right? It makes sense now, because I knew what was coming, right? But this is the kind of stuff you want to keep in mind once you start understanding how the champions work, regardless of whether we're talking core champions or evergreens or event or time gate. Understand how they work, and then you can place them in fun different ways. All right, so Aura of Courage is kind of the big deal for her. This is the major the major buff, one of them. Aura of Protection is another one. It increases all damage, damage of all champions for each enemy attacking Nayeli, and or each enemy in rage stack. We'll talk about enrage in a bit. But basically, if these were all getting to, if we take the familiars off here, nope, yeah, they're not going to get there. They're still just going to toast these people. But if we had enemies that were getting all the way to Nayeli, like that, like she just got attacked, like that would count as being under attack, then her buff for protection would go up. So this is kind of her, what I refer to as a tank buff. This is just kind of a general support buff. This is why she has, you know, a support tag. But this is more why she has a tank tag, right? So when she is tanking, actually actively tanking enemies, she will buff all of her party members. We'll come up to the specialization. She gets that real quick. This is something that Nayeli gets a little, gets people a little confused sometimes. She has 2 specializations, and they basically enable her to do 2 different things. If we go Oath of Vengeance, what you're saying is, it's not really communicated well here, but what you're saying here is, Nayeli's really just going to be that support character. Not, she'll be a little tanky, but not real tanky. That's Oath of Vengeance. She's all about just making sure she gives you a double damage, and that's really it. She's just going to focus on buffing you and not necessarily on tanking. Oath of Devotion. It says it only increases the health of Nayeli by 70 because that's what it does here when you choose the spec. But what it also enables is a bit more health along the way, and she's going to have health share to all of her allies. And health share we'll look at here in a moment because this is the spec we're going to choose. It basically shares a portion of her health with everyone else on her team. So she makes them healthier, makes them able to take damage, because there are cases where you're going to take damage from, like everyone in your party can take damage against certain bosses and certain enemies. This is her tanking spec. This is really, if you're going to put her in that front column, it should probably be here. There are times when you don't necessarily need, when you have more than enough damage to push all the way to whatever zone you're going to complete, you don't necessarily have to tank stuff. Sure, you could go with a vengeance, but currently, Oath of Devotion is basically the best choice. I mean, double damage sounds nice, but it's not a whole lot, and it's, like I said, it's deceptive when it says it's only 70 health. You're getting a lot more out of that overall. So let's see, does she get anything else? Yes. Well, here's the Aura of Heroism. This is her health share, so it's 25% of her max health. So again, making her as tanky as possible, and helping out the party. And it really kind of becomes a big effect when you start getting multiple tanks in a party. But even on its own, it's good. And we'll see they added health, like here. Her final health, I've got this in scientific notation. 1.89 EO4, which is basically almost 18,900 health that she's getting in her final update. So she's, she's getting, she got some more tankiness. She got some more damagey buffs. That's what she gets here at the end. You notice they didn't give her like an Aura Protection upgrade in the most recent. They just went all in on just straight up, let's just give the buffs through Aura of Courage and then give her more health with the most recent soft cap upgrade. One of the other things you can tell is a tank. A tank will have an Overwhelm stat. Overwhelm is something that comes into play when you're newer and isn't as big of a deal later on. I mean, you definitely want to tank with people who have Overwhelm. You don't want to put people... This is why Brunor isn't really a tank with his 5 Overwhelm. He does have a feat that will give him more Overwhelm. So there are some shenanigans that can happen in certain variants where you don't have a tank, but you can use Brunor to help kind of separate damage. But he's not really a tank. You want to look for someone who has like at least a 20 Overwhelm to be your tank in your front line. That's just kind of standard. Okay. So yeah, that's Nayeli. Straightforward. Now we're into one of my favorites. We get Jarlaxel. Let me throw him in his original. As much as it pains me to take him out of the pirate skin. So Jarlaxel, we're going to throw him right here in our DPS. What we already talked about was where we were going to put our DPS. Jarlaxxl is a DPS gold champion, so he offers the damages and he offers a bonus to gold, and that's all he does. He does not support your party in any way. He does not tank. He is here to kill things and make money. Fitting. Very fitting if you understand Jarlaxxl. Rapier Jarlaxxl attacks the furthest enemy. Notice once we've seen closest, we've seen random. Now we have furthest. If it dies, he keeps on attacking, having his damage each time. So you'll notice he'll jump back here and he'll backstab one of these little pixies. If we didn't have other people killing things on the screen, he would just continue backstabbing until either everything was dead or he didn't kill something. It is important to note these attacks furthest, attacks closest, attacks random. These statements are important. They may not feel important early on, but they will. Like when you get to the point where enemies start building up on your tank, if you're attacking the furthest enemy, that means you're not helping your tank at all, right? Your tank's just taking a beating and ultimately falling over, and you're like, oh, well, sucks to be you, while you kill things back here. Not always the greatest, but early on, Jarlaxxl is a fantastic DPS, and for starting players, is kind of your go-to. He's where you want to focus your buffs. So Master of Piracy is his first thing. Right away, he's like, yeah, give me more gold. So increases gold fine by 25% for each drow or rogue champion in the formation. Early on, you don't necessarily need to build around this, but it is just a nice little bonus. So he's giving you a bonus just with him being in there. And if you end up with any other drow or rogues at some point, you're going to get even more. Master of Disguise increases the damage of Jarlaxxl for each good or neutral champion next to them. So now we're looking at alignments. So we've got good with Brunor, we've got good with Celeste, and we've got good with Nayeli. So it's almost like he's perfect in a starter formation, right? He's going to do more damage because he's surrounded by these nice people. His ultimate is Raiding Party. He summons the Brigand Earth to attack enemies in the formation from afar with cannon fire. So he basically, I guess we can show, Brunor just jumps out and does a big slam. Right, there it is. Yeah, he's got a little wind up. Celeste, you'll see her fire fall down, and then she glows back here. Nayeli jumps out and slams her sword down. And if there had been other enemies on the screen, they would have frozen. And then Jarlaxxl just calls down the rain. We see cannons. It basically damages everything on the screen multiple times. It's pretty fantastic. Let's go to his specialization choice. We are going to look at whether or not you are a Secret Lord of Luskin or the leader of the Brigand Earth. Technically, he's kind of both, but you're going to pick whichever one he's going to focus on. Secret Lord of Luskin is that Master of Disguise thing, so if he's going to be surrounded with neutral good people and you want to give him more damages, you would go this way. Otherwise, this is Master of Piracy. This is going to buff the gold find. Not going to lie, this is basically all I ever choose for Jarlaxxl. Because gold is gold. You always want more gold. There are occasional uses for this one. If you just need more damage and you don't care, you know you have enough gold to do whatever you're going to do in a variant, then you could go Secret Lord of Luskin. But by the time you need that, you'll know when to use it. So we're going to level him all the way up, and we'll take a look at any other abilities he has, and his most recent upgrades at the end. So this is what his specialization was. Master Attuner. So he increases damage to Jarlaxxl for each epic item equipped by other champions in the formation. Again, early on, this isn't going to be a big deal because you're not going to have epic items. Epics are purples. Like you see the purple border around the outside of these. That means these are epics. So as a newer player, this isn't going to do anything for you. But as you start getting better and better gear, you'll find Jarlaxxl does more and more damage. That fits into him canonically. He does like people that have nice gear. If we look at his end upgrades, he got some Master of Disguise. He got Master of Tuner. That's it. They just went damages for Jarlaxxl at endgame, which tells me they think his gold find is fine, which I am in agreement with. He's one of the highest pure gold find champions in the game. Yeah, it's a big deal. I don't think we really needed. I don't think he needed more gold find. So they just went all in for damage. at endgame, which, again, if you're newer, that probably doesn't matter so much. But for anybody else watching, if you want to understand, how did the core champions change recently, now you know. Calliope is next up. Let's get her. Man, I'm having to change out of these pirate skins. It hurts me. It hurts. All right, so we have Calliope. I'm going to throw her up here. Calliope is a healing and support. That's a bit of a misnomer. She doesn't heal. She gives you temporary hit points. Healing is, hey, I took damage and I'm going to heal that damage back up. Temporary hit points is, these just go above your health and you're not actually healed back up to full, but you just have a little bit of bonus that can come in and be taken advantage of when you take damage. They are two different things you need to understand as two different things that function differently, because there is a time for healing and there's a time for shielding. So Calliope shields are very important, whether you're starting out in the game or whether you're, an end-game player and you need to, manipulate protection for your champions. It's good to keep that in mind. But let's start off. Vicious Mockery is her basic attack. Let's loose a string of insulting melodies hitting the two closest enemies. So she gets to hit multiple enemies. It's the first time we've seen that in a basic attack for core champions, of the core champions we've been talking about so far. Her ultimate lets loose a piercing crossbow bolt and shields all members of the party. So she can shield everyone with her ultimate, and that comes in super handy. Let's talk about her abilities. Bardic Inspiration increases the damage of champions in the column in front of Calliope. So once again, we're talking about, placement matters. If we put her back here, she's going to buff Celeste. That doesn't do Jarlaxxl any good. So she needs to be in this column behind Jarlaxxl. Again, we want to focus when we're building a formation. This is a different. There's a Gaarawarr's Guide to Formations. You can go check that out. But when you're building a formation, you want to focus buffs all around your primary DPS for the most part. Song of Protection grants temporary hit points to damaged champions within 2 slots of Calliope, with a 15-second cooldown per champion. So she can only grant these shields every 15 seconds per champion in this base form, and it can only grant up to 200% of a champion's max HP in a shield. So this is the first time we see within 2 slots as a descriptor. That means if we hover over, we'll see that these arrows are going places and they'll move based off where we put her. So anyone within 2 slots of her, if they get attacked by somebody, they're going to get a little shield that pops up. And here's her ultimate effect if we want to show. Boom. And then everyone got a little shield that isn't showing. Here we go. See, 1296 shield if you look in here. It shows up as yellow health, but because our champions have so much health, it's not showing up at all. It will here in a bit. Okay, for her specialization, we have an interesting functionality with Calliope. And this is where we get into more of the truly kind of like with Celeste. It's truly about, with Celeste, it's about how you're building your formation. With Bruenor, it's partially how you're building your formation, and partially are you able to tank yet, large amounts yet. Jarlaxel, it's just do you want damage or gold? But with Calliope, we're seeing, do you want damage? Or do you want to change the functionality of her shield? So this decreases the cooldown on Calliope's temporary hit points by 5 seconds. That's refers to her protection. So originally it's every 15 seconds, which means every minute you're getting 4 potential shields. If you choose this, she starts shielding 6 times a minute. If your whole party is taking damage or your tank is taking damage and survivability is your key, this becomes a very big deal. Because there's a really solid increase with this reduction by 5 seconds. Otherwise, you're just going to go, more damages. We're going to choose more damages here. And then we'll level her up. And we're taking forever. There we go. All right. College of Valor. This is what we just chose for a specialization. And you'll notice, hey, there's nothing else going on for Calliope. A lot of the core champions, unlike the later on Evergreen event and Timegate champions, a lot of the core champions are very straightforward. They don't want you to have to think about all the things with these champions when you're brand new, because it can get confusing sometimes. So they try to make them pretty straightforward. We'll see the upgrade she got. She got some protection, all champs damage, and inspiration. So they just, they gave her pretty well-rounded upgrades recently, which is pretty solid. So let's move on to Ashara. Ashara is either a DPS or a support. So here's where we get into champions who you kind of have to look at your formation and figure out, how am I going to use them? Because if you can only really have in this game, because of the way it works, you can only really have one DPS champion. So you're going to need to decide early on what you're going to do and who you're going to use. Ashara got a lot of upgrades recently that have made her... Oh, I need to change her skin. Let's get her looking normal. That have turned her into a pretty powerhouse DPS. So she can be someone... I think early on, I still think Jarlaxel early on is your best bet for DPS. Because again, for the reasons, because he doesn't have anything he can offer as a support. So if he is existing in your formation and he's not your DPS, he's kind of a giant waste. But early on, you really want the gold from him. So building around Jarlaxel is kind of ideal early on. That's what we're going to do here. We're going to go dwarves and elves. Because her first thing is her specialization. Jarlaxel says, hey, he's a drow. Heads up, drow is a dark elf, so he counts under elves and dwarves. See, it says including drow. So we're going to go elves and dwarves. We're going to level up. She is a champion that has multiple specialization choices. Here, we hit it here. It's really deep. You're not going to run into it early on, but eventually you'll be able to choose a second one. I'm just going to pick one. We didn't really go over her specializations much, and that's because they really are specific to who you're trying to buff. That's all you're choosing. You're choosing which type of character is my primary DPS, and how do I want to buff them, and who else do I want to include in the counting of that buff. So her first specialization increases the damage of whoever you choose. We chose dwarves and elves. Now she has a Paragon of Curse Ball. Increases the potency of her bond abilities by 100% for every matching bonded race in the party. So here's where that second choice comes in, right? So initially we're like, okay, I want to buff the primary DPS. You definitely want to do that. But then with your second choice, whichever one is going to be your second off choice, you're going to look to try to match it with the most number of people in your party, because through the Paragon ability, it's going to increase her buff. So additionally, Ashara gains the effect of a given bond if at least 3 champions are affected by it. So this is how she can buff herself and become your primary DPS. She's unusual. She gets a lot of extra attacks as she upgrades. You notice here. So her base attack is a magic missile that shoots multiple out. But as she upgrades, she gets even more magic missiles. She becomes, I think she gets up to 5 over time. So I think she starts out at 3 and then goes up twice. She'll end up with 5. That's a big deal if you're attacking the same target 5 times, or if you can attack 5 separate targets, or you can hit all kinds of stuff, right? I believe this just targets one target. But when you end up with hit-based and armor-based enemies, you're taking out multiple chunks when she attacks. That's a big deal. We're going up Take Flight. Whenever the party's under attack, Ashara takes flight and increases her damage by 10% every 5 seconds, stacking multiplicatively up to 20 times, which basically means over the course of 100 seconds, because we can do multiplication. If you can live that long, she's going to ramp up her damage every 5 seconds. Pretty nice, but again, that requires you to have a tank that can sustain that kind of damage for that long. This is where her second specialization kicked in. And let's see what she gets out at the top now. So yeah, they just straight up buffed her bond abilities. Look at that. She's 4 out of her last 5 upgrades are bond ability buffs, which means she is an even better support, but also an even better DPS, because remember, these bond abilities apply to herself if you set her up that way. Oh, I didn't put her in the formation, did I? She doesn't require herself to be anywhere specifically. So you can do... Oh, seriously? You can put her anywhere you want, and it's fine. You know, it's nice when you have champions that have that kind of freedom. They'll just buff everyone. You don't need to move them around. She is one of those champions. Here's her ultimate Fireball. She leaps into the air, flapping her wings and pushing all enemies away from the party. So we get a nice crowd control pushback. There we go. And then she summons a massive Fireball that hits a random enemy and all other enemies within a small radius. So let's take a look at that. See, she takes off. Boom. Fireball. Yeah. That's one of the longest cooldowns in the game. Its base cooldown is 420 seconds. Because C&E likes their inside jokes. All right. Minsk is up next. You might recognize him with his buddy Boo, the space hamster. Let's go all the way back down to his regular skin. And drag him into the party. We'll put him back here. Minsk is another one of those, hey, I'm either DPS or I'm support. Again, I've kind of built this around Jarlaxxl, so we're gonna look at him as more of a support character. He gets a cleave, so when he hits the nearest enemy, he hits that enemy and anyone else around them, which is super nice. Right off the bat, he gets boastful. Whenever a non-boss enemy wave spawns, there's a 10% chance of an extra enemy spawning and a 2% chance of 2 extra enemies spawning. So basically, this is an effect that the community refers to as a speed effect, because the quicker you spawn enemies, the faster you move through a level. So it speeds your progress through the game. It's a very minor effect. There's no upgrades for this. This is as good as it gets. That's it. His specialization is a favorite enemy. So you pick an enemy type based off what you are dealing with in an adventure. And suddenly everybody does more damage to that type. I'm just going to go humanoids. It does require you to know a bit about your adventure. You can access that kind of information on the Reddit. There's posts about it. There's some wikis. There's some websites, like fan sites that have been made. The information is out there for you to make informed decisions. Grab them. You can find links to those in the Discord, or you can find them on the Reddit. If we look at what he gets after this. Let me first show. We don't have any humanoids here. We'll actually move forward and try to find a humanoid level so you can see what it looks like. It's got a nice little graphic to let you know if your damage is applying. Oh, I can probably just go back, can't I? Let me just go back and find one. We'll get there quicker. As I'm doing this, I see a question that I'm going to respond to, even though normally I would wait to the end. Scanner Brightly, does a half-elf count as a buff for elves or humans? Neither. Historically, the Forgotten Realms are fairly racist, and halves don't count as wholes. It's just the way it is. She actually gets a buff later, and I think I picked it, didn't I? Yes, half-bloods. So Ashara has a half-blood pact bond later. If you have a half-elf or a half-orc, that's what you would choose. Okay, so if we look at these, see how these enemies, when they come out, they have this big red circle with a red skull underneath them. That means they're marked as Minsk's favored enemy. So that's what you want to look for to know if you picked something, if you picked the right thing. But how do you know what to pick? If you hover over, we can't see it real here, but if you hover over, see it says half-orc humanoid, human humanoid. Hovering over an enemy will tell you what type of enemy it is and to know if it qualifies for one of Minsk's favored enemies. It does have to say specifically that. So if it doesn't say humanoid, undead, fey, etc., I can't remember off the top of my head what the others are. If it doesn't specifically say it, then it doesn't work against it. So he's pretty straightforward that way. Minsk isn't super complicated. Overkill. Whenever Minsk hits a single enemy with his cleave, he deals more damage. So this is more of one of his DPS abilities. If you're using him as a DPS, that's when this kicks in. And this is basically his boss killer. Because when you get a boss to a boss level, you need to be able to spike that boss with lots of damage. This is how he does it. Legendary Slayer. Minsk deals extra damage against his favorite enemies. So again, this is centered around his DPS options. His support option really is, hey, favorite enemies. Everybody does damage against my favorite enemies. And if we look at the end of his upgrades, he gets some all champs damage. He gets some favorite ability. a good chunk of favored ability. So they're trying to make him a bit more supporty at the top end, it looks like. All right. Up next, your favorite champion and mine, Delena. There's a skin for her, but I don't have it enabled. Delena is a pure DPS champion. So here we get into, we had a pure support in Bruenor. Now we get our first pure DPS. Delena offers nothing but damage. That's it. She doesn't even have any all champs damage bonuses. Some pure DPSs might have some all champs damage bonuses in there. Delena is just damage. She has her base ability changes. She has multiple. I'll put her in so we can let it rotate. One of them is her Firebolt. So small blast of fire hits a single random enemy. After she fires something off here, we'll see. There we go. Lightning Bolt. A line of lightning shoots towards a random enemy, damaging all enemies in a line. Let's get her to trigger her next one. She basically rotates as she attacks through two different things. Ice Storm. A storm of ice rains from above, hitting all enemies in a small radius. So her attack changes all the time. It just rotates through these as she fires them off. So she can bring the single target damage. She can bring a line-based AoE, and she can bring a point-based AoE, right? And she alternates between that all the time. So she has a lot of utility in terms of her base attacks, because she kind of does it all. It's just that it's always going to change. So let's look at her starting ability. Increase the damage of Delena by 10% each time they attack, up to a max of 10 stacks. Stacks reset 10 seconds after reaching max stacks or after not attacking for 10 seconds. So basically, she surges up, hits a major point, sits there for a little bit, and then falls back down, and then ramps back up again. This is how they kind of do, like I said, it's a surge of power. It's not on demand. It's just slowly ramps up over time. So her damage is going to ramp up. You'll do a lot of damage, and then it's going to fall off, and then you're not going to kill stuff, when you're near a wall, and then you're slowly going to get up, and then it's going to kill stuff again. So it's very swingy. It's going to go up and down. That's just a function of how she works. Empowered spell. Whenever Delena attacks, there's a 50% chance that their spell will burn for an additional damage over 6 seconds. So basically, she's going to add a dot. There's a 50% chance she's going to add a dot at the end of her, after she hits someone, and that enemy or enemies, if she hits with one of her AoEs, they're going to burn and scream, and yeah. So they're going to have a no good, very fun day, right? This is part of her damage bonus, because again, anything that's going to add more damage, that ups her potential damage. So again, very swingy DPS, because not only is Surge of Power making you go up and down, but now you've got an occasional dot that might kick in. And when is it going to kick in? Like, do you get it when you're all the way maxed? Like, that's going to give you the most potential damage, but maybe it doesn't fire while you're there at all, because, even at 50% chance, RNG can just say, nope, you don't get it for a while. So real swingy. Specialization paths. So this matters for her. Font of Magic, it's that ups her empowered spell, so that triples the damage. 200% bonus means it's triple damage on her dot, whereas Tides of Chaos doubles her surge of power. So Tides of Chaos is going to make the swing bigger, right? Like, it's going to raise everything and just make your damage more consistent over time, whereas Font of Magic is just in those times when you do get that burst from that dot, it's going to make the burst even bigger. So this is more consistent damage that's going to affect your bud, for those who know what that is, but that's base ultimate damage. That's a whole other conversation. For those that affect for anybody who wants to get their bud as high as possible, that's Tides of Chaos. If you're just looking for the biggest potential damage spike, it's Font of Magic. I tend to choose Tides of Chaos, but your methods may vary. And she goes way up here, folks. 4560 on her levels. She levels up a lot. So we chose Tides of Chaos. Spell Bombardment is her next ability. Increases damage of Delena by 100% for each champion in front of them in the formation. This means, ideally, Delena would be back here. But as we were talking about earlier, we get buffs from being behind Nayeli, adjacent to different people. I mean, we can move some of these around, but Calliope buffs in front of her. So one of the reason we jokingly say in the community, who's Delena, is because she doesn't necessarily fit early on with a lot of the champions that you get in your core. So early on, you're probably not going to see a lot of use with her because of that. Now, of course, you can bring her up here. You can use her in this formation, and she can do a great amount of damage. Look, we're looking at E114s in the damages here. Jarlaxel also E114s, right? There's an E115 for her because she's spiking up with her Surge of Power, right? So she has the ability to do, better damage than Jarlaxel. It's just she's going to swing around a lot, and she's not necessarily getting all of the buffs she could potentially be, which does kind of keep her from really becoming super effective, even though this is just 100% for each champion. So keep that in mind. You don't necessarily need to build around Spell Bombardment, but if you can, there's a little bit of bonus damage there to be had. It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier with Brunor's Dwarven Glory. You don't necessarily build a party around it, but you enjoy it if you can get it, right? I'm going to put Jarlaxxl back in the DPS spot. Twinned Spell. Next ability, whenever Delena attacks, there's a 50% chance that they will copy their attack on another target. So again, just more randomness for Delena. She's a wild magic sorcerer. That means there's all the randomness in her kit. When it all works out, if she has max Surge of Power and she gets her burn on and she twins it, yeah, you're going to have some nice damage. But how often is that going to align? How often do those stars align? It just doesn't happen a lot. She did. They are going pretty heavy into getting Delena DPS here, if you'll notice. She got triple damages. So instead of 100%, which is a double damage bonus, she gets 200%. So she got some triple damages. They gave you Empowered Spell and Dispel Bombardment. So they're trying to really take her damage up at the high end. Doesn't necessarily help you out if you're a newer player, but, something to try out for our veteran players. Makos does have a couple skins. I guess I didn't even have his champion when enabled. All right. We'll just go straight into... we didn't talk about Delena's ultimate. Hold on. Boom. Controlled Chaos. Delena's eyes begin to glow, attacking faster and causing her Surge of Power ability to not reset for 15 seconds. So this is her, I guess in some games you would call it her I win button. I don't know that it necessarily applies here, but instead of doing some kind of crazy effect like some champions do, she's just going to start doing more and more damage faster and faster and faster. That can be nice. It can help you ramp up your butt. It can also help you spike down a boss. Let's keep that in mind. And Minsk's we missed. I forgot Minsk's too. Minsk sends Boo out to go for the eyes. He will attack 5 random enemies. And those enemies are then debuffed. They take more damage for the next 30 seconds. And then Minsk jumps out and does a big cleave across, whoever. Pretty solid ability early on. So keep that one in mind. Makos, let's throw Makos out here. Makos is another, I guess multi-role champion. DPS support and gold. More often than not, he sees use as your support champion in a formation. But early on, he's kind of your gold farming champion. He does this through his specializations. His Dark Luck and his Dark Blessing. These are real straightforward specializations. If you want to farm gold with him, you go Dark Luck. If you want him to buff your party a bunch, you go Dark Blessing. So we're gonna buff the party, and then we're gonna hold the button down for a real long time. There we go. So, specialization, that is his thing. Dark Blessing. It's going to get buffs as you go. He gets a draw power. This is an additional functionality, so it increases the effect of Dark Blessing if Makos is not on the edge of the formation. Not really something you need to build around. Again, this is just a 100% bonus, so it's a double damage. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I can tell you right now in Sword Coast, there's no point. You're not having your DPS He can't be adjacent to a DPS. Like his buff is not adjacent. So if I were to put him in the middle of the formation here, he would be adjacent to our DPS, and our DPS then wouldn't get the buff. So it's not worth building around in Sword Coast, but in other places you might. Well, most other places it's very limited. There are a couple formations out there, most likely in events, where you're going to be able to pull that off with draw power. Most of the time, not really. There is a way to do it with Arkon. Arkon's real weird. We'll get to Arkon in a bit. He's our last champion. Yeah, we're going to go a little longer than an hour for this first part, but that's just how 12 champions is going to work. So that's really it for Makos. That's it. You either choose him to be a buffer or a gold fine champion and do the DPS. That's it. There's nothing else in his kit, really. If you choose the gold fine spec, so if you choose Dark Luck, he does get another bonus ability like Draw Power that's specific to that path that involves, I want to say it's having other sorcerers and evil people in the formation. You know what? Let's go take a look so I make sure I'm doing this right. It's something I very rarely even mess with anymore. So I always have to remind myself when I go. So Dark Luck, when Makos lands the killing blow on an enemy, they drop more gold. So this is when he is not. He doesn't necessarily have to be DPS, but because you can land a killing blow with his ultimate. But also if you're using him as DPS, you're going to get more gold. Eldritch Alchemy increases the effect of Dark Luck by 25% for each evil or warlock. That's it. Warlock champion in the formation, not sorcerer. Glad I checked. So if you were to end up building out a formation like this, if you could build out a viable full Eldritch Alchemy type formation, this 25% bonus along with this ends up being a pretty big gold boost. This is why Makos farming is something you can do early on before you get Azaka. You can go check out my guide to Azaka to find out more about Azaka, but it's a thing. His ultimate is Circle of Death. It does a lot of damage. It picks a random enemy. We didn't even see it. Picks a random enemy and just goes boom all around it and blows them up. And when you get extra gold when he kills things, that's what those little silver or platinum pieces were. So gold normally drops, but if he kills somebody, boom. See, there's a little platinum coin there. That's how you know you got extra gold off that kill. We're going to rotate some people out. And we're going to bring in Tyrell. That's the Icewind Dale skin that you can get out of the gem shop right now. But let's go back to base Tyrell, our Firebolt. He's a tanky, healing, and support. He's really primarily either tanking or support. People don't necessarily use him for his heals. There are some real edge case scenarios where, yes, you could build around his healing, but yeah, we'll get into that. His base attack is Shillelagh. Tyrell attacks the closest enemy with his staff and just whacks him. His specialization, though, this is again one of those more important ones. Moonbeam is his support spec, and Wild Shape is his tanking spec. So support healing is out of Moonbeam, tanking and support is out of Wild Shape. If he's not tanking, he should be in Moonbeam. That's really what it comes down to. So we're going to have him in the back. When he does tank, he turns into, in his base skin, he turns into a bear. In most of his skins, he turns into a bear. In that Icewind Dale skin I was in, he turns into a moose. So keep that in mind. When he does go into Wild Shape, he gets a bunch of health, and he increases his Overwhelm point. See, they turn him into a big tank. And he gets some tanking buffs based off what we talked about earlier, where I said these are tanking buffs, where when he gets attacked, he buffs people, other people. He does get that in that shape. He doesn't get them in Moonbeam. So his specs, this is another case where when you're changing specializations, just kind of like with Makos, what happens in Nayeli, what happens afterwards changes. So there's different things to understand in each of these specializations. If you hit up my guides on the Reddit wiki, like if you put !gar_guides in chat, it'll give you a link. I put the specs and the different changes in those guides so that you understand before you do it what happens. With Moonbeam, he increases the damage of all champions, but the amount is reduced depending on the number of adjacent champions he's next to. So This is why his healing doesn't necessarily get a lot of use, because usually you want to go all in on the buffing, and that means you don't want him next to a lot of people. Whereas if you needed the healing, you'd want him next to potentially a lot of people. If you could get him just next to your tank, great, but usually you want him as far away from major groups of people, which is why I've got him all the way in the back, just adjacent to 2 people. That's going to give him the best buff. So, yeah, we're going to go Moonbeam. Because if we were like here, right, that's 4 people, he's not going to buff very much. But back here, he's going to buff a lot more. Pretty straightforward. Let's level him all the way up. His ultimate is just this laser beam. It's called Sunbeam, but a beam of brilliant light flashes out from his offhand and hits all enemies in a line. Like that. It's fantastic. I love it so much. All right, Druidic Healing heals champions adjacent to him every second. Again, you'll see that. You'll see it popping up right here off of Ashara and Makos. There are variants where your positioning with Tyrell with healing matters, but in general, what you're really placing him for in your formation is his buff. So keep that in mind. 1 second. Allergies. All right. As you can see, Tyrell is very straightforward. There is literally nothing else in his kit. The new soft cap gave him a bit more healing. Okay. Moonbeam and all champs damage. So they're making him trying to make him more supporty. But yeah, that's it for Tyrell. There isn't really a whole lot else going on. Jamilla, pure DPS. So we get another pure DPS in your core. She attacks the closest enemy. If more of the enemies are nearby, she attacks up to 2 of them and reduces her base and ultimate cooldowns by 2 seconds. So basically, the more enemies she's able to attack, the faster she's going to attack and do damage. Pretty neat. Unarmored defense increases her health. Jamila is a little confused as a champion. She thinks she's tanky. Because she's a barbarian. Increases her health by 94 plus 10% of the max health of each tank champion they're adjacent to. So Jamila likes to be up here, usually. Like right next to the tanks, preferably in a multi-tank formation and adjacent to as many of them as possible. So that she can have lots of health. But again, she's a DPS. So it's not necessarily something you specifically build around. It's just something that can happen. Although her specializations can change that, so we'll look at that in a moment. Frontline Fighter increases Jamila's damage by 100% for each tank champion she's adjacent to. See, there we go. She really wants to be near the tanks. But again, you don't necessarily have to build around this. You just don't. There's extra damage here to be had, but sometimes that's just not going to be possible. Berserker Confidence increases her damage based on how many temporary hit points they currently have. So this means you want to use Jamila with someone like Calliope. There are other people who give temporary hit points. Calliope tends to give the biggest amount. If we pop this off, boom, she's going to end up with a huge shield. See, temporary hit points, so she's going to get a nice big boost there. Now, if we look at her specialization, she goes either all in on being near tanks with Frontline Fighter or having those temporary HP shields. I tend to go for this one. It's kind of the bigger bang for the buck, and usually if I'm going to use Jamila, I'm using Calliope with her. So boom, a Frontline Fighter. Remember, again, this would have been the other spec, and this is basically based off being adjacent to lots of tank champions. I just find Berserker Confidence based off the shield, like going Indomitable Might, that makes it a better key, but it's really going to be formation dependent, so keep that in mind. Retaliation increases Jamila's damage for each enemy attacking her or an adjacent champion. Again, Jamila really wants to be a tank. She really wants to be in that tank line fighting. That's why she gets some health bonuses and stuff, but she's really not a tank, so please don't do that unless you absolutely have to. There may be some variants in some situations where you do need a tank and you've got Jamila and another tank, so you can try to do it it's real weird. It's real weird. I don't recommend it. But yeah, so basically whenever enemies hit that front line, she starts doing more damage, right? And she's going to ramp up her damage much like a tank does. So there's a nice double dip effect here, because your tank should be buffing her more for each enemy attacking, and she's going to do more damage for each enemy attacking. So keep that in mind. She may not look like she's doing, she's basically going to ramp up her damage the longer it takes to kill things, which is odd, but yeah, eventually you get there. That's kind of how this game works in some cases. And that's going to be it for Jamila. What they get her at the end? Some Frontline Fighter, some Berserker Confidence. So they're trying to go into these again, but then they just gave her a big boost of damage on herself. So that's where she's at now at the end game. And finally we come to Arkon. Oh, her ultimate. Rage, of course. It leaps quickly from enemy to enemy, swinging her greatsword through them in a feat of strength and agility. She hits 6 times in total, so it's just all the damages. She's just, it kind of just jumped out quickly there, but if you have a lot of enemies, she just bam, 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 bam. She'll hit them one after the other. Pretty nice. Then we get into Arkon. Arkon's messy. I think that's probably the best thing. Here's a couple skins. We get a new one right now. Well, not right now. Later on today, if you've been doing your Year's End Festival each day, there's a Gladiator Arkon skin and a feat. But yeah, he's in his base form here. So Arkon doesn't work like other champions. He is a DPS tanking champion, which right away should tell you things are a little different with him. Tiamat's Fury, Arkon attacks the closest enemy with the Fury of Tiamat. His ultimate, Chango, his Manticore, enters the battle dealing enormous damage to a random enemy and all nearby enemies. So that's a big AoE. Yeah, I'm just going to go through his abilities and then we'll talk about what this actually means. Rage of the Daggerboard. When 6+ enemies are attacking Arkon, so this is when he's in tank form, his base attack gains a small cleave and deals 5 times damage. When 16+ enemies are attacking, his base attack is a massive flame breath attack that does 25 times damage. Counts each enemy in rage attack as an additional attacker. This part is key. So normally, like this part up here, when 6+ enemies are attacking him, this means he has to be in the tank line. However, I said we'd come back to what enrage means. We'll talk about it now. Enrage stacks happen most commonly with bosses. So when a boss comes out on the screen and you don't kill it immediately, it starts to enrage slowly over time, and it builds up enrage stacks. Each enrage stack counts as an additional attacker for a lot of these tanking buffs. With Arkon, he can be not the tank, and when an enemy starts to enrage, he will start getting this bonus. So that is something to remember. You don't necessarily have to have Arkon up here to get those other flamey fun things like the cleave and the flame. On a boss, he can get that even if he's back here somewhere because of the enrage mechanic. Normally, and that works for most things. As long as there's enrage going on, if there's an enrage mechanic on a character, it's going to start ramping up regardless of whether they're the one taking the damage or not. Heroic Fury is his health share, so he gets that right away. And then we get into kind of the meat and potatoes of Arkon's kit. Arkon can either go bulk up or usurped power. Bulk up increases all positional formation abilities that he receives if he's in the front column of the formation. So basically, I don't want to talk this. He wants to be buffed like he's the DPS, but if he's in bulk up, he's the tank. So directing those buffs, you want to direct those buffs to him, and then he will get a larger version of them. With the core champions, that's difficult to do. One thing this does is, you would need to change a lot of things, but like Brunor needs to be in the same column. Well, if Arkon's in the tank column, Brunor can't be there too. Brunor's not a tank. It would increase a buff from Calliope or Celeste if they're in the column behind him. But the kind of all champs damage buff coming off Tyrell and Ashara and Makos, well, not Makos, Tyrell and Ashara, because they buff everyone. Those wouldn't get bulked up. So there's rules that you need to understand when using Arkon about what formational abilities are, and what are positional and what aren't. And this goes into Usurp Power 2. Usurp Bulk Up is kind of more of, I refer to it kind of as his tanking spec, but I don't know that that's necessarily accurate. It's just a different way to build him. If you were using a lot of directed formational abilities and you want him tanking, then that's kind of the way to go. Usurp Power tends to be what you're talking about when you're building an Arkon formation. So Usurp Power, Arkon receives all positional formation abilities received by adjacent champions that don't already target him. So again, anything that targets everyone, like Tyrell and Ashara, this doesn't buff it. This doesn't buff it. You really, with Arkon, you really, really, really want abilities that are like Brunor's and Calliopes and Celeste's and Makos's and Nieli's. They are going to, target a specific position in the formation, and then he wants to be adjacent to that position to then grab them in an increase. Yeah, so we're gonna do this as usurped. And then I'll place him in here in a second, and you'll see what we're talking about. Let's look at the rest. So Rising Anger increases the damage of evil champions for each enemy attacking Arkon and or each enemy in rage stack. So he really wants to be in an evil group. Well, spoiler alert, we didn't get a lot of evil people in our core. We've got Makos. That's it. And then he gets Dark Order Synergy. So this gets into affiliations, which we didn't talk about too much, but he is affiliated with both Force Grey and the Dark Order. Dark Order is Arkon, Krull, and Torragar, which are not the other two. Krull and Torragar are not core champions. So this isn't going to come in until you get those champions. But basically, Arkon attacks a half a second sooner for each other Dark Order member in the formation. So, increasing his attack speed is a good way to increase your Bud, but also to clear out levels quicker. So that's nice. It's a nice synergy that he gets, but it's not going to matter if you don't have those champions. What do we see at the top end? At the top end, he gets a bunch more health and a bunch more damage, which makes sense, right? So if we want to place Arkon in a formation so that we can... Oh, yes, Jarlaxel is evil as well. Yeah, well, I don't know that I necessarily agree with this. I guess because I've read all the Dritz books, and in the current incarnation of Jarlaxel, I don't think that's accurate. But again, these are snapshots in time. But even then, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think he's just kind of neutral. But we'll see. Neutral leaning towards good nowadays. But yeah, so in the game, he's neutral evil. That counts. But again, I don't think you're using... this is one of those abilities that you're not necessarily building your formation around. It's just nice if it happens. So if we're going to put Arkon in, we need to build around positional formation abilities that he doesn't get. Like that somebody else gets. So you wouldn't just throw him in here. Because right now he gets all of these buffs. Just because he's in the position where we had our DPS before. He needs to be somewhere that isn't here, right? It's very difficult to do in this specific formation, but if we wanted to maximize something in this formation, and this, please don't use this formation, I'm just trying to demonstrate, you'd need to start moving things around to more like this. So right now, if we go back to where we were, he's at 264 E 123 damage. This is where you would normally put your primary DPS to get as much damage as possible, right? Like here, we've got one E134 damage for Jarlaxxl, right? So it's a significant decrease to put Arkon in this formation here, because he's not able to. The big key on Arkon is this usurp. He's not able to usurp anything really here. So if we change things around so that he's somewhere where he's able to usurp, he does more damage now. So now he's up to E129. Still not over Jarlaxel. So again, this is Arkon and Usurp is a very specific functionality. This is not. He needs very specific champions in his formation. The core 12 champions are not great for building an Arkon formation. But this is what you would do, because what did I just change here? Well, Nayeli only buffs in the column behind her. So now Arkon is usurping off of either of these two people to get Nayeli's buff at a greater level. We can see this if we go over to formation buffs. We can find Nayeli. That's just the health one. Here. Aura of Courage usurped. See, it will tell you that you are now getting this at a greater amount than normal. All right. We're also usurping Calliope's buff, because Calliope buffs the column in front. We're getting Brunor's buff because Brunor is in the column in front. Makos only buffs non-adjacent, so he is buffing Brunor and Tyrell, but not Brunor, Tyrell, and Calliope, but not Ashara and Minsk. So Arkon once again can usurp off one of these people. He only gets it once. And Celeste buffs the column in front of her. So that's healing. So he is able to usurp that off of either Ashara or Makos. This basically maximizes the ability to usurp by putting him here. However, again, in this formation, we have Minsk and Tyrell and Ashara who are doing just generic buffs to everyone. He can't usurp that, so he's not going to outdo your Jarlaxxl in this situation. But this is how you would. This is what you have to think about when you're building a formation around a character like this. Yeah, he's weird. He's weird. There is another character that builds like that. You'll get an event champion later. That's in the next event coming up here in Winter Shield. You will run into Artemis Intrari, who has similar types of things. Not quite the same, but he does diverge from that normal formational building path. So that's the core 12. I do want to jump back in. I want to do one thing more. We did not talk about feats, and I'm just going to kind of go over feats in general for each character. So in most cases, you're going to see lots of feats that are like here. They're going to be very champion specific in terms of how they affect you, but you get these generic, like this is all champs damage. He does have this odd defensive duelist feat, but then he has feats for rally, and then he gets some stat feats that let him do things sometimes. And then he has this Dwarven Glory one, which currently doesn't do a whole lot because we don't have a lot of dwarves that he can pair with very well. But you get a bunch of these. You want to check out and make sure you're using feats that matter for what's going on. So like with Brunor, you're going to want to stick to generally the all champs damage and the rally when you're a starting player. With Celeste, you tend to stick to all champs damage and healing. She does get some Crusader's Mantle stuff that's later on, but these are you're not going to have those right away. Nayeli, because usually you're using as a tank, you want to run some health and some Aura of Courage if you have it, but usually you're starting off with all champs damage and health, or potentially health and overwhelm. Either of those works. You can swap them out on the fly. If Nayeli's dying too quick, try double tank. But if she's surviving just fine, do a tank and some damage, right? Like you can piece these together. And she obviously goes real deep into that type of view. Like this is a real big one. But again, purple means real up there. You're not going to run into that right away. Jarlaxxl, if you're using Jarlaxxl, just throw all the gold you can at him. Starting off, you're going to have just his own damage and gold, but you kind of just focus on gold for him. Calliope gets some all champs, but she also gets some protection, and early on as a newer player, this is going to be important, so you just throw one of each in. But later on, you can just dive in however you'd like. Ashara, again, she starts off with some all champs damage and her own damage. That tends to be how you end up running her unless you're real late game and you start getting some of these others. Obviously, this would be the big go-to feat for Ashara. 80% off all of her bond stuff, because that is her big focus. Minsk, If you're using him as support, you would go the all champs damage. If you're using him as your DPS, obviously, then you would go for DPS. You've also got, if you do get to the point where you can get his Mighty Helm, that is 80% on his favorite enemy. But remember, this really only matters on stages where you're fighting his favorite enemy. So anywhere else, you might want to switch out of this and into some regular damage and then back in on his favorite enemies. He's a bit more manipulative that way. Delena DPS. That's all she does. Depending on what you have available, you just want to pick the biggest numbers. That's all she does is DPS. So Makos, depending on if you're using him to buff or to be your killer, obviously you would choose either all champs damage, or you would choose either with damage and gold. Yeah, pretty straightforward. So I think you're getting the kind of getting the idea here about how you pick your feats when you're a new player. Tyrell, again, are we using him as support? Are we using him as a tank? You're probably not using him as a healer, but there is an option there if that actually happens, which would blow my mind, but you know, people have done it. Jamila, all the damages. You notice I have the Weapon Master one, which is the big one. I don't even remember where that came from, but yeah, if you're going to use her, you might as well go all in, right? I don't know why I have the 30% when I should have the 60%, though. That makes me look bad. There we go. This tells you how little I use Jamila nowadays, but, you know, she can be real big. Like, look at now with this fully powered up shield. She normally has 282 health, and now she's got a 2.63 EO5 shield on top of that, so... yeah, that helps. That's why I tend to go with the shield focused specialization. She also, again, you can buff up her overwhelm. There is the ability to give her enough overwhelm, like you can add a 5 and a 10 and take her and buff her up 15 to take her to 20, which is kind of the basic place for a tank, and use her as a tank. Do I recommend that? Hell no. But is it possible if you absolutely need to? Yeah. Which is real neat. I mean, that feels right for a barbarian. I don't know that it gets used that often. But it's available, and I like, you know, having stuff available. Arkon, you know, again, damages. He can be tanky, he can be damagey. He's got this Hand of Vecna that's real weird. Boosts his damage, but then he takes damage. Yeah, and then with the Year's End Festival, you can earn this one for free. You don't have to buy it. That's it, folks. Those are the Core 12 champions. We're going to take a quick break while I drink some water from my voice. Maybe like 10, 15 seconds, and we'll be back to do the Q&A. So hang in there. I'll be right back. And we're back. I almost started talking and it was still muted. That would have been humorous. Humorous. Well done getting through all 12 in 80 minutes. Did it take... Oh, it did take 80 minutes. Dang it. It is what it is. This is the last stream for me for this year for Gaarawarr's Guides on the CNE channel. We'll be back in January. The first thing right out of the gate for the Saturday show will be a year in review for all the 2020 champs. So instead of 12 champions, I'll be talking about 19. So I have a feeling the Q&A is going to be short for that. There's just not a way to do all this in an hour and actually do them justice. I don't even know if I mean, the core champions are pretty straightforward. The 2020 champions, not so much. So yeah, it'll be an interesting show. It'll be interesting. Tune in. So let's go through this. I'm going to try to hit the ones that are specific to the core champions. Let me see. So Nyali didn't get her taunt back. No, that's a deep cut. Way back in the day, Oath of Devotion spec, Nyali had a taunt. No, they took it away, and then they gave it to Briv. She's still a little upset about that. When you have both Tyrell and Arkon in the front row, I'm going to take this because it's got Arkon in it, in the front row. Why does Arkon's Usurping take Tyrell's Embodiment Law bonus, but it adds 0 damage? I don't know. Sounds like a bug. Submit a bug report. I missed what he said about Jarlaxxl. He said Jarl had another gold find buff in the level cap. No, I said he didn't get any gold find buffs because Jarlaxxl is all the gold find. Jarlaxxl has a lot of gold find. He didn't need any more. Delena specs make what difference? Oh, I think we went over that while I was talking. Basically, the left spec gives her a bigger dot. The right spec gives her bigger base damage and thus sets a higher bud. So depending on what you're looking for, that's how you choose. Question about Makos. Can you double dip and get extra bonus for characters that are evil warlocks? No, they just count once. They only count once. To my understanding, they only count once. Again, it's not something... People don't necessarily go around building out groups like that. But I can tell you, if you were to make a group like that, just single dipping, not double dipping, just single dipping, one for each credit, and you went full evil / warlock, and Makos is getting the kills, and you could kill at a comparative level to anything else, like, all other things equal. Makos would be the second best gold find champion in the game behind Krull. Although I did that number before Freely came out. I got to redo it with Freely, but Krull's so far astronomically ahead of everyone else, and then Makos would come in second if you did that perfect storm for Makos, which most people don't do, but you could technically kind of do with bud spiking, right? Let's see. Wouldn't Usurp be less than 100% for new players? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Usurp is not... Arkon is not great for new players. I tried to communicate that, but I will go over this again. Arkon's Usurp starts off at a low value. If we look at it. Base is 50%, which means you would get buffs at half the level that you would normally get them. Why? Why? Because they don't want you doing this right off the bat. What they want you doing, if you don't have good items and your usurp, like you can't usurp at over 100%, like right now I'm at 1787%. If you can't usurp it at 100% or better, don't usurp, you bulk up. That's kind of the decision. I think I left that part out. But that's how you choose whether you're using bulk up or usurp power early on. You're bulking up if your bonus is less than 100%. But once you get it over 100%, you can start usurping and making those buffs bigger and trying to do the Arkon dance. Is there a list somewhere that shows all the formation buffs that affect Arkon? I kind of tried to put one together, and I haven't updated it lately. Over the break, I am going to attempt to update all of my guides to not only just the current soft cap, but all of the current stuff, so that we can go into 2021 with fully updated champion guides. there are 72 champions currently in the game, and we're getting another one next week. Am I going to be able to do that in the next couple of weeks? I don't know, but I'm going to try. But yeah, in that I will be attempting to review Arkon again. I had tried to list out in like in a column form. I'd included bulk up too, but was that a mistake? Because at the time it didn't even tell you what got bulked up. At least usurp tells you if it's usurping. I'm going to try to go through and bounce every single buff off Arkon and see which ones show up in his formational abilities. Like again, you look over here in formation buffs, and on incoming effects, you see which ones say usurped. And I will try to mark all of those off again and update them all again. Yeah, so there is a version of that in my guide for him on the Reddit wiki, but it's not updated. It's not completely up to date, because the problem is I really don't want to do it, but every time they add a new champion, I've then got to go update his guide, and that's just so much work. Is the list the same for Artemis? I have not verified that the list is the same for Artemis, so I cannot say that it's the same. What I will say is that generally speaking, if something qualifies as a positional formation ability for Arkon, if that is the same thing that Artemis works off of, then it should. But this isn't really an Artemis thing. So, when talking about feats, can they stack like 10% and 25% damage? Yeah, and they multiply against each other. Each one is its own separate multiplier. So a 10% and a 25%. That isn't a 35% bonus. That's higher. So if you were starting off at let's say your damage was 100%, you were doing 100 points of damage, and then you add a 10%, that takes you to 110. I don't know why I'm multiplying. Here we go, 110. And then you multiply that by another 25%. You end up at 137.5. So using them both gets you 37.5% of a bonus, right? So however they're going to multiply against each other. All right, that's all the question specifics. I'm going to go back and do the general ones. Here's a question: why aren't any of these changes in the changelog? I assume you're talking about like all of the soft cap upgrades. It's because they didn't want to list out 72 champions and all of their soft cap upgrades in this screen. That's a lot. Is it fair to ask them to put that in a blog post? Yeah. I think that's fair. Did they do that? No. But I think it's fair to ask. Will we ever get it? I don't know. But I think it's fair to ask for things like that. But generally speaking, for stuff like that, they say, hey, the soft cap went up, and then they let the community go to figure out, go look at those changes and get that information. Yeah, I know sometimes in the past, like I think Silisa, I think they've gone in and done like a post where they review all the champions and then they tell you like how things went up and down. I did see a list that was kind of a general, kind of what I was talking about here, where, okay, they're just kind of the same, or, oh, they got a little more supporty, or, this or that. Like Jarlaxel, he just got more damage for himself. So I would say his power curve in terms of a support or a Goldfind champion he's not a support, but in terms of Goldfind champion, didn't change. He didn't need to change. He's a bit strong in that regard. His damage probably needed to go up, so that's what they did. So yeah, I mean, I think in general, whenever they add soft cap, they're trying to balance at the high end. So you'll probably see nothing really very good for people like Zorbu, Krull, Avrin, etc. Whereas you'll probably see a lot more for, say, Ashara or Delena. I've heard Ashara got some, I mean, we looked at Ashara's stuff. She's got, more bond stuff, which is good. These all multiply. So this is going to give her more damage. And Delena got, more damage, including some like triple damages. So, at the high end, they may be doing a lot better. It doesn't necessarily help balance on the way to that, but, they're trying to get the end game in more of a place where there's more options. And that's probably what all of these soft caps were targeted for. What did they do? My pushing wall is like 60 lower than it was yesterday. I don't know that was them. I don't know. Let's see. This didn't change. Facing with, I don't think this changed. In a bad... Oh, if you were using Omen's ultimate to push, yeah, they got rid of the double dipping. So if that was what you were doing, then yeah, you can't do that anymore. You're not supposed to be able to double dip into debuffs. What does double dipping mean? It means when you attack someone that's debuffed, the amount of damage you do, including that debuff, sets your bud. And then your ultimates are based off bud. So if your ultimate then hits something and does damage based off with the debuff included, that's double dipping, and that's not supposed to happen. So they've removed that. So if you were using that to get super high, that ain't around anymore. Yeah, I mean, that should have been, that's really it. I don't know if anything else changed. Yeah. So I guess it's really going to depend on how you were getting to where you were getting. I know this week I pushed, if we look at my favor, I'm at E54 favor in Torms now. I finally cleared, if you'll notice, there's no level 1000 thing here. I finally cleared level 1000 and I got a bunch of gold. And that was yesterday. So, there's still ways to go real far in this game. If you were relying on a double dipping ultimate, that's not one of them. A question: after getting all the champions, is it better to use time gate pieces straight away or hold off until later? Okay, so if you've gone full Pokemon and you've caught them all, the next step is then to gear them all up. There are multiple ways to do that. I think I would hope that by the time you got all champions, that your core and evergreens are full epics. If they're not, there's stop number one. That's just buy lots of gold chests with gems. But to gear up your event and time gate champions, kind of the best way to do that is a combination of running time gates for them and buying patron chests. So you'll have to figure out your groupings. There are different groupings for different champions, and there's ways to manipulate those groupings to just gear up certain champions and then start removing certain champions from pools with with some feats and stuff, so that you're kind of manipulating into the smallest champion pools possible and gearing them all up and then swapping over and getting guaranteed stuff. Like, there's ways to do that with Vajra and Strahd, not so much with Mert. But yeah, that's kind of the long game that you're in now at that point, is trying to get full epics across all of those champions. And you have to use everything at your disposal. You got to use patron chests. You got to use time gates. You got to use their events when they roll back around. For the time gate champions, and when I say time gate champions, it's anyone that won't be in an event ever again, which is all of the year ones and now some of the year two champions. So they can pop up in natural time gates. So you want to take that time to grab those. So now whenever you look at, like, we have a time gate weekend right now, whenever you pop open your free time gate weekend, then like what I used to look for is, does anybody need an epic? Like, originally it's, do I have a champion? And if I don't have them, I grab that champion, right? Then it's, do I have, who has the worst gear? And whoever had the worst gear, I would then target. And then it's, who has full epics and who doesn't. So if Stokey didn't have one of her epics, Stokey would be my guaranteed choice from this, because I just want to get Stokey. I want to use that opportunity to get Stokey's epic. And then now I'm at the point where I make my decision based off who has the lowest average item level. So I will be picking a Stokey time gate this weekend because of that. But those are kind of the decisions you start making as you start reaching these different thresholds. Also keep in mind, these weekend chests will gear out your event champions as well. So make sure you're signed up for the newsletter. Let's see. Were there any impressive upgrades with the soft cap increase? I don't really know. Like I said, there's 72 champions in the game. I haven't reviewed them all yet. I will be, but that's a lot of information to go through. Like I said, I think you're probably going to look at champions that were underperforming before, and you'll probably have seen them get some decent stuff. Whereas anybody that was super great before, like anyone that was currently in the meta and doing well, probably not. They're probably happy with where they are. They're going to let them just kind of sit and be there while they try to raise everyone else up. When will Lucius become available in store? I just got my PC back after repairs and missed the event. I don't know. because I always get the champions when they come out. I don't know if they're not showing up in the store. Put in a ticket and ask why they're not showing up in the store. Otherwise, you're going to have to run like a time gate and grab them. And when you do, then they'll have some stuff available for you to buy in the store. Whenever you run a time gate, then like it triggers an offer in the store for stuff for them. Arrows for days. Long question about chests. I know that silvers level your characters more efficiently than gold. True. But does that take the contracts into consideration for events? No. No. The silver chests don't do much for me gold-wise. Right. Yeah. Because by the time I get to the end of run, I soft capped and the gold gained is, yeah, I know. Since the silvers don't have contracts, feels like I'm sacrificing event character item levels for evergreens. Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much. Except for, so what you're getting out of silvers is you're getting a mix of duplicate items for evergreen champions, which are giving you item levels there, but you're also getting some blacksmithing contracts, which you can put on event champions. What that's doing, though, is just giving you pure item levels. If you want to get epics, you need to buy gold chests. You need to invest in gold chests because you want those bounty contracts. And bounty contracts only drop out of golds. So that's why I let silver chests that I just loot naturally accumulate, and then I spend my gems. I just spent 100,000. I bought 200 gold chests for this coming up event. That tends to be, I think, what I'm going to be doing going forward is just buying. Like what this, the rest of this is whatever I loot and whatever comes from chest codes in any given 3-week span, and then I'm going to make sure that I buy 200 with gems every event, right? Because then opening all of these gets me all of these bounty contracts, which let me gear up my event champion so that they're, somewhat decently geared. That's me. I like to keep things balanced. Not everybody does that. So, your methods may vary. Some people go all in on silvers. Like Mars just opened 10,000 silver chests on stream because he was hunting for his shinies. And he wanted that right away. I just opened whatever I naturally got and ended up, I am now fully gilded across all of my core and evergreen champions, just by focusing more on the gold chests and then just opening whatever silver chests I happen to loot in that 3-week period between events. So however you want to focus that you can, but personally, I try to keep the balance in the sense that I spend my gems on the gold chests, and I just let the silvers occur naturally. Can you click and hold the level? Yes, that's what I was doing earlier. Do you get silvers in the free play in a time gate? I know you get them in events, specifically asking for Mistra. I grew up calling her Maestra, but it seems like everyone else who knows Dungeons and Dragons calls her Mistra, and I think that's the correct thing. I think Ed Greenwood, I kind of have to take he created the Forgotten Realms, so I have to go with Ed on that one. I've got to get myself used to saying it the same way. So a Mistra's favor. So when you're in a time gates work differently from events. Well, I'm not going to go into events, but time gates, and specifically in a time gate so that you're not confused. Specifically in a time gate, you get, here, I'll open this one up so we can look at it specifically, because I know I'm going to do the Stokie one. Specifically, you get this first adventure. You're going to get a gold chest. The second adventure, you're going to get a gold chest. And then this is a variant. You get one of the variants from when she was in an event. She is now a time gate champion. You get one of the variants that would have happened in an event. And if you complete it, you get a gold chest. So you get 3 gold chests. Now, while you're doing all of this stuff, in a time gate, for every unique 100 levels you go, so think of it like setting a bar. So when you reach level 100, you get a silver chest. The next time you reach a level 100 in this unique time gate, you won't get anything. But if you reach 200, you get another silver chest. So every 100 areas, as far as you can go, you get a silver chest, right? You can get that in these runs. I tend to do these 2 runs as I push real hard here. Well, not real hard, but I push here and I push here, and then I tend to be good because for me, with my power level, this gets me to like level 400 or 500, and this gets me up into the 700s, and then I'm done, and I don't do a free play. But if I were pushing on my other account, and I got like to, 100 here, and this one got me to 200, so I could easily do this. I do this, you don't push on the variant, you just do it and get the hell out. If I thought I could get to 300 or 400, then I would do a free play and do that if it was going to be easy. I don't grind super hard in time gates. I don't feel they're worth that much. But if I can pick up an extra chest or two really easily, I will. That's kind of how you have to make your decision. So is there going to be a new Dritz monk? To my understanding, like we were talking about earlier, oh no, this was yesterday. Somebody asked me yesterday, what year Dale Reckoning is Idle Champion set in? And I said it isn't. Because it isn't set in any given year. It is just this amalgamation of characters from different times in their lives, set in the Forgotten Realms settings, and you get to run campaigns and yada, yada, yada. It is not set in any specific year. So the Brunor here could be from a different snapshot than like point of time than the Minsk, than the Celeste, than whatever. So Dritz is specifically taken as a snapshot from, what he is as his fighter. Where is he? Where's a boy? I can never remember. There we go. So if we look at Dritz, he comes in, he is, or a ranger, excuse me. So he's a drow ranger, lawful good, age 75. This tells you what he is and what snapshot they're taking is the age, right? So this is a while back in Forgotten Realms story. This is not the modern updated Dritz. This is the snapshot of Dritz from back then. They're not going to add, I really doubt that there are so many characters that they can add that they haven't yet, that people would love to see. I don't know that they'll ever go back and add a duplicate of a character that is already here and say, okay, well now it's Dritz at age 120 or whatever. Like, maybe they could get into that with skins and feats at some point if they wanted to, like they kind of did with Arkon. Arkon has a Hand of Vecna skin, and you can lock in the feat. So this is a different Arkon than the Force Grey Arkon, right? This is the more Dark Order Arkon, whereas this is the Force Grey Arkon. I could see them going into that, but the thing is that doesn't change how he works. So I don't know that, we're going to see a Dritz that is a drow monk. For those of you who don't know, Dritz spends some time with a high-level monk who has transcended the planes of reality and life, and learns some fun things and, does some monk shit. I don't know that we're ever going to get a ranger. Really, it should be like ranger, fighter, monk, Dritz. I don't know that that's ever going to happen. So yeah. Make a list for Artemis as well as Arkon. I will try. Is there a list for champion basic attacks? Like which champions cleave? I don't think there's a list. No, I think it's just you. Eventually, as you play the game, you start to learn what each champion does. Right? Like, this is a magic attack. This is a magic attack. Does someone here have? We don't have any ranged people in this first lineup, do we? There's a ranged attack. It looks like an arrow. But and how each one attacks, you just have to read and you just kind of learn. You don't have to learn them all at once. You just kind of focus on one at a time. Somebody's asking me, how do you make choices about whether or not to buy a wild offer item? And I said, and I kind of stand by this. I think that's kind of the time that you dive into that character and learn what they do so that you can understand, is this item going to be beneficial to me? Like, is buying this make sense? Not just at that price point, but just in general for that champion. Because if it's an item that just is kind of pointless, and I'll go over, let's talk about Krull for a second. Like Arkon's army. Krull's Arkon's army ability, just kind of pointless to his kit. You're never really building. It should have been kind of core, but it isn't. Instead, it's things like pain and pilfer, right? But Arkon's army, mean, if you're collecting, guilds, then grab it. But like Arkhan's army ability isn't something that you really care about for Krull, because it just doesn't do anything. Nothing worthwhile. Nothing. I mean, Krull is so outrageously powerful because of his plagues and virulent strain that all you care about really are his virulent strain feats, and then you get, if you can up his plague items, great. Everything else is just, it's there, So that's kind of how you have to learn as you go along. Take the time to pick one champion because of whatever trigger, either a wild offer or you're trying to build a certain formation around characters that cleave. That's when you start deep diving and you start remembering a bit more. But even there's just some information that I don't keep in my mind. Like I remember that he has a cleave, but I don't necessarily always remember what every champion does with their basic attack because I don't necessarily use them all. So whenever I'm, using them in a formation, I'm building out a formation for a variant that I'm not used to. And I'm using champions that aren't necessarily ones that I'm always used to. Then I open them up and I make sure I remember how they all work and then go from there. Do gold chests only provide shiny to core evergreen? Yes. Gold and silver chests, both. So here's the way it works. Whatever type of chest you're opening, whether it's a gold or a silver, whether it's named or whether it's, or a group or whatever, as long as it has gear for a champion in it, it can drop a shiny. Who it drops for is based off who the chest drops things for. So if you're just opening a regular silver or gold chest, like up here, so regular silver or gold, those shinies are only going to drop for your core and evergreen champions. Whereas that gold Mert chest could drop a shiny for anyone that qualifies for Mert. And that gold Strahd chest could drop a shiny for anyone that qualifies for Strahd. In Strahd's case and Vajra's case, you can manipulate who qualifies with feats to either increase the pool or decrease the pool. But Mert's just, everyone that increases Mert because his is an alignment based. But that's kind of how you determine, like, if I'm going to get a shiny out of a chest, who's it going to drop for? Well, it's only going to drop for the people in that chest. This is different from feats. Feats only drop from normal gold chests. All feats for every champion in the game that is a chest feat will drop from normal gold chests. My time gate this week gave me Evil and Rosie and Jaheira. I never heard anyone talk about them and don't have any of them. Do you recommend any of them? I think Evelyn is a great tank. She suffers from being in a slot with Krull. So she doesn't get used a lot. But she's a great tank. Rosie's... Jaheira is better than I probably give her credit for. Where even is she? Here we go. She's better than I probably give her credit for. I know I went through and I reviewed. I don't really put her in the bottom. I would put Rosie kind of in the bottom group of champions. Like there's a top group, there's a massive middle group, and then there's a bottom group. And the top and the bottom groups are pretty small. They're the outliers, and Rosie's an outlier. I think Jaheira is somewhere in that big jumbled mass of the middle. She's a champion that doesn't really fit the norm of her slot. So she is a DPS support in a slot that, generally speaking, is gold find champions. Jarlaxxl, Stokey, Ishi, Paulton, all buff gold find, and Baloth the Entertainer coming next Wednesday is going to buff gold find. He's in this slot. So Sentry and Jaheira are kind of outliers in this slot. So Sentry at least offers speed boost and some heroic synergy. Jaheira is just kind of this DPS support in an early slot that can be neat, but wants to build, because of the way her specializations works, wants to build around groups, specifically typed group formations, and we don't really get into a lot of this in Idle Champions, building around groups currently. A lot of times because there aren't lots of viable options in these groups. Like this one with barbarians, fighters, rogues, and monks is probably the most viable option, just off the top of my head. But that's just me guessing. Like I don't know if anybody's ever really tried to put a lot of effort into figuring out, how viable each of those sections is. So Jaheira is interesting, but she's just not necessarily standout currently. What is Evergreen versus Event? So the core champions we're talking about today are just the core 12 you start the game with. The Evergreens are next up in the lot. Evergreens can be earned at any time, year-round, simply by doing or completing things in the game. So Hitch is an Evergreen. He can be earned right here, right now, by going to the newsletter in-game and signing up for it, and they will give you Hitch. He swaps with Delena, and then forever after you'll go, who's Delena? Yeah, he's great. He's a pure support character that is one of the best hidden DPS classes in the game, or champions in the game. Yeah, Hitch is great. But there's also Dritz Doerden. We were just talking about him. You earn him in the Sword Coast campaign. And you earn Azaka and Dragonbait in Tomb of Annihilation, and you earn Alcoria in Waterdeep. So these are champions, evergreen champions. You can earn them at any point in time just by completing these things in the game. Whereas Timegate and event champions, I separate those two now, but event champions are any champion that's introduced through an event and that you unlock via that event, right? So upcoming, we have Winter Shield, which will be starting next Wednesday. And you'll be able to earn Artemis and Trary. You'll be able to earn Neris. Is it Cathon? Neris. Neris, what's your last name? Doesn't tell me. Well, you'll be able to earn Neris, and you'll be able to earn Baloth Baratil, Baloth the Entertainer. He's going to be a drow sorcerer, I think, right? So those are event champions. And then there's, with these time gates, there are now some champions that are relegated year 1 and some of the year 2 champions, because you can only earn the most recent 3 champions to be released in an event, and we're now in year 4 of events. So year 1 champions like Stokey are now what I call time gate champions, because this is the only place you can get them. So yeah. Those silvers are regular silvers or champion silvers. I don't know what that means. These silvers are regular silvers. If it doesn't have a champion name, it's not a champion chest. All chests are named specifically for what they contain, except for just generic silver, generic gold, because those were just the original chests. Is there a preferred order to spending gems? Sort of. Someone probably... Yeah, Neris Cathon, according to the bio. Okay, I knew it was in there somewhere. I got it right. Yay! Somebody probably already posted this already, but if you hit GVA... Oh, Mox Pro was getting there. If you hit GVA, there's a gems visual aid that myself in coordination with Mars put together. It doesn't necessarily tell you what you should buy. It just kind of tries to help explain how to make those decisions in a way that we felt was efficient. There is one thing that needs to be updated there, and that is that the Mage Hand should just be bought right away. It is now only 250 gems, so you just get it. Just get it. Whereas it used to be 1,000, which was a big investment back then. But now it's 250. Just buy it right away. After that, the guide kind of it's a I shouldn't call it a guide, a visual aid. So it basically just helps you to give you the thought process of how to decide where you want to spend your gems and when might be a good idea to look at spending them on other things. But it doesn't necessarily tell you go buy this. Except I will say go buy the Mage Hand. Can you say Dritz Familiar's name out loud? By familiar, I'm assuming you mean Guinevere? Like his panther companion? I wouldn't call Guinevere a familiar. He also has a steed, a unicorn mount. I can't remember. Andahar. So, but Andahar is more of a, I won't want to say mindless, but Guinevere is an actual, though if you go back and you read some of the books, Guinevere is an actual panther, like just this pure epitome of an amazing panther, black panther from the astral plane that was bound into an item. So she is basically the panther, like the panther that all other panthers wish they could be. That is Guinevere. She is a thinking, feeling being that just happens to be bound to that item to allow Dritz or anyone who holds the item to call her forth. Whereas Andahar is just a magical mount that gets summoned. What, if any, ideas do you have, would you like to see for meaningful new directions in in-game content? Ooh, that's a big question. I will say that in the developer, I went back and watched the dev Q&A from Wednesday. I didn't get to watch the first part because I was prepping for our D&D game that we did that night. But they made a comment about potentially adding features to the game that would allow for some sort of cooperative play, but they didn't want to go into that. One thing that I in the community have occasionally asked for and kind of been shut down about is the idea of events where everyone can work together to achieve something, so that it feels more like we're coming together as a community and beating something. I would like to see things like that. They've done this in other games where there's a boss. If you go do this one specific adventure and you attack this boss, everyone that beats the boss counts towards totals, and then, and it's more of like a group completion of kind of like a raid, if you would, but in a kind of a non-cooperative setting. You're not necessarily seeing everybody else. You're just contributing to the community total to try to take something down and defeat something. I like that kind of idea. I don't know that that's where they're going. But I do like those kind of community events. Like, so you're organizing a community to complete something that no one person or even 5 or 10 people would be able to do. I don't necessarily want competitive stuff. I don't want anything competitive. I don't necessarily want anybody messing with my stuff. So cooperative gameplay in a normal sense, like, hey, I want to join and can join 2 formations and fight out a battle. I don't know that I necessarily want that, but I do like the idea of cooperative stuff. So I will give that as an option. There are lots of things I would like to see in in-game content. I would love to see like an artifact system. I would love to see higher level potentials as we do go deeper and deeper into these adventures and they get more and more difficult. Eventually, I'd love to see, instead of just silver and gold chests, I'd love to see platinum chests with higher level gear. And maybe that's when we could see artifacts. Like, I would see artifacts that you pick up, but then you can assign to, like, you would have to complete crazy adventures and variants to have a chance to get these artifacts and low drop rates, maybe like running free plays and certain crazy things. And I don't know, there's ways to do it. And then you get like a super powerful item, but then you only get one, and then you can place it on a character or maybe in an artifact slot. I don't know, there's all kinds of things that the community has put out that I think would be neat, but will we ever get things like that? I have no idea. And we're about to end, so let me try to answer this one. I'm a very new player and I'm excited for the new character. He seems like a lot of fun for farming. What are your thoughts? So far, he looks interesting. He's going to be a kind of a support and a gold find champion. He's got some interesting mechanics. He definitely looks very item dependent because he's built around this stack thing, and the stacks are only increased based off when his items get increased, really. So he's going to be a bit of an item sink. It'll be interesting. I look forward to see what his actual numbers turn out to be, though, because that's ultimately what's going to determine if he gets used a lot. And we'll find that out on Wednesday. And that's it, folks. We're done for 2020. There will be one more CNE Games Idle Champion stream for 2020. It's going to be next Wednesday. It will be Improvised Champions. So Mark Meir will be, as he always does on Improvised Champions, will be voicing Baloth, the Entertainer, along with Christina Ariel and Havant, the Masked Lord of Waterdeep. They will be, if I remember correctly, they will be playing through Baloth's variants. So we will get Baloth commenting on Baloth. It's going to be very meta. So join them for 1 p.m. on Wednesday, next Wednesday, and that will be the final CNE Games stream of the year. There's no other streams other than that one. So it's been great. I told everybody yesterday, thank you all for joining us this year. All of the streams they've done here on the CNE Games channel have been amazing. Much thanks to Dylan and everybody at CNE Games that made these possible. Because originally we just had the Dev Q&A stream every week. Now we have 11 streams every week. It's wild. So it's been crazy, but that wouldn't happen if all of you hadn't shown up. So thank you for showing up and asking questions and being generally supportive of the community. And I will see you on Discord and the Reddit. Happy holidays, everybody.